Welcome everybody. We are live on YouTube. Welcome to the elite men's panel for the Broken Arrow Skyrace. I am Dylan Bowman, and we are so excited to have you guys here, both our live audience and for those who watch us later on YouTube. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. I am joined by some phenomenal athletes, some friends of mine, some guys who I've known on the scene for many years who have a lot of valuable things to share with you this evening. And I will do my best to tee things up and stand out of the way so that they can provide lots of good insights, inspiration, information for you all as you tackle your own trail and ultra journey. Again, I am Dylan Bowman. I am the founder of Pyllars. We are a training and media company in trail running, and I am very happy to have partnered with the Broken Arrow Skyrace to help with these fun, interactive roundtables. We did one with an elite women's panel just a few weeks ago, which you can find here on the same YouTube channel. And tonight I am joined by a star-studded cast. We have Paddy O'Leary, we have Jorge Maravilla, we have Max King, and we have Hayden Hawks all here joining us live. Before we get to them, I just want to reinforce for those who are here live and watching that we are here on behalf of the Broken Arrow Skyrace, of course, broadcasting on their YouTube channel. The Broken Arrow Skyrace this year is going to be taking place October 1st to 3rd in Olympic Valley, California, a place that has huge significance and tradition in our little sport. And it is one of the great mountain races in North America. And I would like to encourage all of you who are listening and watching here tonight to, if you feel like it, register for the race. I talked to the race director, Brendan Madigan, today on the phone. And even though on Ultra Sign Up, it does appear that at least a few of the races are sold out, they do have wait lists. And I have it on good authority from Brendan himself that at least the VK and the 52K races have wait lists that are likely to move. So if you are sufficiently inspired after this conversation, I would definitely encourage you to go to Ultra Sign Up, search Broken Arrow, and register for one of the wait lists. It is really an awesome, awesome event. And we do encourage you all to be there in person to enjoy it. If you aren't going to be there in person, another very exciting thing that Broken Arrow is going to be doing this year is a very professional live stream of the race itself. This is part of the next generation of our sport, and I couldn't be more excited to be helping with that personally myself, alongside my friend and one of our guests tonight, Mr. Jorge Maravilla. The two of us and Corinne Malcolm will be anchoring the live stream coverage of the Broken Arrow Skyrace for the whole weekend, first weekend in October. So put it on your calendar if you can't be there live. Finally, before we get to the guests, I just want to encourage everybody who is watching. We want this to be very interactive. We want this to be conversational. So if you have questions for our amazing lineup of guests, please do put those in the chat here on YouTube, and hopefully those will be funneled to me and I can tee up our guests with these great questions. So don't be shy, ask away. Okay, enough of a monologue from me. Gentlemen, welcome. It's great to have you here. I want to do a quick, very brief around the horn, just a quick introduction for each one of you guys. Maybe we'll start with you, Paddy, because you're top left for me. Just a quick introduction of yourself, where you're calling in from, and maybe what you're training for right now.
How's it going, lads? Paddy O'Leary here in foggy San Francisco. I'm originally from Ireland. I'm actually flying there tomorrow morning. Going to Ireland for 3 weeks, and then going to be racing CCC. So that'll be my long race, the long race for the year, and then I'm going short and fast, the VK, the 26K Broken Arrow, and the Dipsy in November. Got to have some range in the running, Max.
Exactly. And I want to talk about that. So, we'll move over to Jorge now. Jorge, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm just slightly north of Mr. O'Leary here in Marin County, in central Marin, where it's sunny and 84 degrees. And Yeah, it's I feel very fortunate to be part of this wonderful panel tonight, and great to see the future of our sport evolving in this manner. Similar to Paddy, my upcoming ultra trail schedule is a little bit up in the air, just given that tentatively I'm having a little bit of issues with getting my 7-year-old son Joaquin's passport renewed. So that's a little tentative on whether I'll be making my way over to Sham. Currently, it's not looking optimistic, but that's okay. So it may turn into maybe Lake Sonoma 50. And thereafter, similar to Paddy, I think I'm going to then get myself ready for cross country season. And more than anything, I'm actually really excited to finally race California International Marathon as a 43-year young man. There's a member now in this group here who's in the masters category that I have to take into very high consideration in the masters category. I thought with the last name of Maravilla, that stands for marvelous or wonderful, was very great, but then you deal with a guy named King.
Already some trash talk on the panel. Gotta love it. So let's move over to the King now. Max, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm even further north, up in Bend, Oregon, where it's 80 and sunny here as well. We got a little bit of smoke too, but we're gonna bypass that. But yeah, and so I had enough of that long stuff early on this year, so I'm cutting it down and going straight to short distance now. And I'm going to do I just signed up for the Mountain Running Championships up in Mount Hood in a couple of weeks, which is a 6-mile race. So 100 miles to 6 miles, span the range and see what happens. So no more of this long stuff.
Yeah, well, you guys have already both teased like having range, and this is something I want to talk to you guys about, but we're going to save that for later. Hayden Hawks, last but not least, please say hello to the audience. Where are you calling in from, and what are you training for currently?
Jorge, I thought you were talking about me in the Masters category, dude. I'm almost there, No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm 30 years old. I'm far from there, but anyways, I'm from Cedar City, Utah, south of everybody. And so if you don't know where that is, it's in between Zion National Park and Bryce Canyon National Park, about 15 minutes from the west entrance of Zion. And so beautiful, beautiful place. I grew up here and currently reside here in Cedar City. And I guess, I'm going on along with the short, range category. I just got off of Western States in June, and I'm actually racing next weekend at Sierra Zinal out in Switzerland. So I fly out on Monday, and then I'll be spending 6 weeks out in Europe with my family, and I'm going to run Sierra Zinal, and then I'm running OCC 50K at the UTMB weekend. So I really like, mixing it up with some of the short stuff, but also tried my hand out this year in the 100-mile distance. So.
Heck yeah. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for the awesome introductions. It's an honor to be able to sit and chat with you guys. And I wasn't planning to get to this until a little bit later, but since everybody has talked about it, I figure like we should start with this concept of having range and versatility as athletes. I think it's something that's unique about all four of you on the call. And I feel like it's something that our viewing audience could get a lot of great insights from, because I think it does contribute to being a better athlete, to have range, to be dynamic, to have some versatility, and to just keep things fresh. So maybe Max, I'll open up with you, because you've been on the scene for a long time and you've displayed probably more range and versatility than maybe any other runner on the planet. You've competed in Olympic trials in the steeplechase. You've been top 10 at Western States. You've been world champion at 100K. You've done basically everything. You've been the world champion of freaking obstacle course racing. It's incredible. So just a broad question to just tee you up with, and then maybe we'll pass it around the horn a little bit. Just the value that you've seen just as an athlete with range, or how you go about sort of training that range and how you keep it fresh for yourself as an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always stemmed back to like keeping motivation in the sport, keeping it fun for me and stuff. And so I've always, every time I switch something up, it's because, something's getting a little stale or something's getting a little old and I need like a new challenge, or I just need to like refresh things a little bit. And So that's why I've always kind of changed it up. And, I had that track and road and cross country short distance background going for a long time. And then when I jumped into ultras in about 2008, it was because of the challenge. Honestly, it was that I liked, that I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to do it. I wasn't very good at it at the start, and I had a lot of things to figure out. And so that was kind of the impetus to get me into the ultras and stuff, and keep things exciting. And then every once in a while, it's like I'll go long and then I'll drop back down. I'll do something totally off the wall, like obstacle racing. And it's always just to kind of keep things fun. But the common thread throughout all of this time is that, it's all based on running. It's all based on general fitness and physiology. And so it's always kind of, I've had that underlying base of fitness for as long as I can remember through all of this. And then you specialize in little bits and pieces of what you actually need to do. And mountain running was one of those things that did not come easy to me at the start. I mean, we're talking true European mountain racing, like at Sears and All and Zagama and stuff like that. And I needed to really specialize and figure that stuff out. And so it took me several years of focusing on just climbing mountains, big vert, and figuring that side of things out before I finally could compete against some of those European guys. So, but it's all running. It takes that base of fitness, and then you specialize in these little individual disciplines.
Yeah. And I love the attitude of not being afraid to fail and not being afraid to learn, because if you only race your strengths, you end up getting stale, and it ends up, potentially, not leading to further development as an athlete. Paddy and Jorge, I know you guys both race cross country. Max, I know you're a big cross country guy yourself. Hayden raced collegiately. Paddy, maybe we'll pass it to you, because I know this is a thing that has surprised a number of people in the San Francisco Bay Area of just how incredible of a cross country runner you are. So maybe talk about how you've enjoyed the practice of cross country every fall and how it's helped you as a trail runner.
Yeah. So I came into running from a multi-sport background where I grew up playing lacrosse, Gaelic football, hurling, doing horse riding, different things like that. And that's why I love the diversity of this sport and all the different things it can do. And then we have a great community and club scene here in the Bay Area. We're very fortunate with the Pacific Association of the USATF circuit, and they have a very competitive cross-country circuit with a lot of roadies and track runners in the midst of that. And back in 2016, many of the lads on this, all the Bay Area lads in this call here, we all set up the San Francisco Running Company cross-country team. And we hammered against them, and we turned a lot of heads in the early days. And it ended up having a competitive cross-country season. I know it's having some good races, got us into the best shape of our lives for Jorge to run the Gold Coast Marathon, for Dylan to do TNF 50, for me to do the TNF 50 and CIM one year. Best races I've had in my life has been off the back of a solid cross-country season, of just getting that fast 3 or 4 miles, 20 minutes of suffering. But then because we have a few ultra runners in the mix of this cross-country scene, we would be in a new park in a corner of the Bay Area, and then we go do a 10-mile long slog together when we're dying. So I think it gives great utility, and it's a great platform to train for longer stuff.
100%. I was just going to say, some of my best races ever came off the back of the cross-country racing season in San Francisco. Jorge, maybe we'll pass it to you. Obviously, as Paddy just mentioned, you're a very well-accomplished trail and ultra runner. Obviously, you've been around the scene for a long time. You, Max, and I are all sort of the same generation, and Paddy and Hayden have sort of come up and are representing the future of the sport in a lot of ways. But you've been a great athlete on the scene. You can run really fast on the roads as well, and you have sort of a diversified skill set, but also you set different goals for yourself, going from a marathon and then this year back to Western States, to your roots as a trail runner. Talk a little bit about this theme of versatility and how it's helped you in your career.
Yeah, I think, it's just similar to what just Max has already expressed, and Paddy, is that I think that versatility is key to just keeping it interesting and fun for ourselves. And I think the commonality amongst all of us, if I dare speak, is that as much as we're all in it to be competitive within our own realms of desires and interests, is that I'd like to believe that every single one of us here is also just like, we want to be that 85-year-old guy to be like, oh, Dylan, remember that year when we were the cross country ultra boys in that cross country scene? And, you know, I think we're in it for the long haul, more so than just what the results speak. And I think part of that interest and desire is keeping it versatile. And for me, I think that, you know, similar, this is funny, the Tokyo Olympics is happening. And so I've kind of been rocking my Tokyo marathon tribute hat. And on the inside, it says, perseverance is power. And I just thought it was a very appropriate hat to wear because it's a big part of what, like Pyllars is saying, it's just like, it's all about trail culture, and trail culture isn't defined by one distance or one speed. It encompasses the versatility and ability to do well in all different things. And for me, I come from a lot of perseverance. So the ability to like go and try to step into a cross country race and just like run as hard as I can, it makes it hungry. So for the desire to go do trail ultras, just as much as when I do trail ultras, I'm like, man, I want to get back on the track, you know? And so it keeps things really interesting. And it also just allows me, a big part of having, if I dare say, a contributor to bringing this community together in the Bay Area and globally, it's like, it keeps me in the pulse of the community, which I love. And it's a big part of why I love this sport, you know, with what it is in the Bay Area. I like being in the cross country scene. I like being in the road scene. I like being in the ultra scene. And maybe I'm not great at any of all those, but I like having a pulse on them because I feel like I have a vibe in it all. And I love being amongst all those groups of people.
Yeah, terrific. So Hayden, maybe I'll ask you something a little bit more pointed or a little bit more practical. Obviously, you're coming off the Western States 100, your first 100-mile race. You finished 8th place, but it was a really hard race for you, and you persevered and you got through it. And now you're shifting your focus to Sierras and all, OCC, to the most competitive, most legendary, shorter distance races on sort of the trail circuit. Maybe give the viewers a little glimpse into what the recovery is like from a long race, and then how you approach sort of the transition from a longer distance race like Western States into something like Sierras and all, which is totally different.
Yeah. You know, just like what everybody else is saying, you know, I'd like to echo kind of what they said with how you need to mix it up, you know, and that includes when you're recovering from a big event. One thing that has helped me a lot over the years, and I've gotten into it, I guess, the last couple of years really heavily, is cycling. You know, I do a lot of gravel biking, and I use Zwift as well. And I really love cycling. Like, cycling's a passion that I have outside of running. I think it's good to have something like that, you know, like a cross training or something you can go to help you maintain fitness when you're not running, because it's just too hard to maintain that high overall fitness the entire year. You can't do it, you know, but you can, like, your body just breaks down, you know, when you're just running all the time. You see a lot of the Europeans, and this is kind of where I got the cycling from, is they have another sport that they do at some time during the year. You know, Francois, Killian, they do a lot of ski mountaineering during the winter. And that really helps them maintain fitness, but not beat themselves up. And it helps mentally as well to have kind of a shift where you can be focused on something else besides, you know, just going out there and pounding the pavement or the trails every day. And so cycling has become my thing. You know, a lot of Europeans use cycling as well. And so, yeah, after Western States, I've been getting on the bike a lot. I did have a short trip up to Alaska, just a family trip where we kind of just recovered, had some fun, got out of the heat. And then I've just been doing a lot of cycling. You know, my mileage running hasn't looked very great. It's only been like 70, 80 miles a week, just because I need my body to recover and I need to sharpen up to be a little bit faster for a race like Sierras I know in OCC. But I've been able to maintain a lot of that fitness and that base that I had going into Western States from biking. And the bike, you know, I can go out there and I can get a couple hour ride in and not beat myself up. You know, it's a completely different stimulus on the body, but it helps with that cardiovascular system. So yeah, I've been doing, you know, some 20-hour weeks still after Western States, but I don't feel beat up because I'm doing a lot of that on the bike. And I have had some key workouts where I've thrown in some strides, thrown in some, faster stuff just to sharpen some things up. But that base is rolling over from Western States. Just got to sharpen things up just a little bit, and I should be ready to go.
Hayden, that's so brilliant. This is why I'm so bullish on your future in the sport. And I would just want to sort of encourage our viewing audience to go and look at Francois Dane's Strava profile from before Hard Rock, because it's totally in line with what Hayden is communicating here, in that he spent many, many hours on the bike. His run volume was really low. He spent the whole winter skiing, and then he showed up in Silverton and trained for 2 weeks and ran the fastest time in history. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can go about training and keeping your body fresh and keeping things varied and dynamic and versatile, as we've been talking about, is just so important for your trail and ultra journey, and ultimately can be great for your performance. And it leads me into sort of another topic that I thought would be interesting to talk about with the four of you. And that is just like the importance of focusing on the little things in our training. And I think all of us have probably come to that realization on our own in time with a lot of experience. And as Jorge alluded to, both Max and Jorge are in the Masters category now, over 40 years old and still at the top of their game. Max, I know you've always been really into sort of strength training and doing the little things to be the best athlete that you could be. And I wondered if maybe you'd give us a little glimpse into that side of things, the things that are not necessarily run specific that you think have contributed to you having such a long, successful career.
Yeah. And, it's becoming more and more important because of that Masters category. I need to keep doing those little things that I've been doing. So, a lot of it, just what Hayden was talking about. I'm definitely doing some more skiing in the winter, some more biking in the summer, just to keep me off my legs a little bit more. I can't handle the run volume that I used to be able to. And then when I'm healthy, I've noticed that what I'm doing is really paying attention to my body and doing a lot of kind of smaller activation type exercises. So in getting healthy over these last 2 years, I was coming off of plantar fasciitis issues. Stuff was not going well with my hips and stuff. And so I just had to kind of basically figure that out. And so now on a daily basis, I'm, stretching my feet, making sure that plantar fasciitis doesn't come back. I'm doing hip mobility exercises and rotations to keep my hips more mobile, but also, flexible. And so that everything is, all those little small rotator muscles in there are working and they're turned on. And I noticed that when I do that stuff, like my running feels way stronger. I feel way better. And you guys, everybody else on the call, plug your ears because I don't want to give all my secrets away to my competitors. But, that's basically what it is like when you feel like your biomechanics are in tune, then the fitness is always there in the background because of how much volume we've put in over the years. And so that's always there. And so when we get that biomechanics like turned on and figured out, then we're really, really strong. We're really, really fast. So.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Max. Paddy, Jorge, do you have anything to add on this front of just the concept of doing the little things that you do outside of your specific run training that you think have really helped?
Yeah, I do. And I think maybe who knows what the listener audience age is, but like Max said, it's interesting that we are in that Masters category, and there's it's something that we can't avoid, but it's interesting that I'm sure I speak for both Max and I, that it's kind of a even bigger lure for us to be like, yo, just because we're in this age group doesn't mean we're slowing down. Like we're still in it and we're still hungrier. But I will let one experience that I had with running Trans Rockies well over 5 years ago, where Mr. Max King had won maybe the second day solo stage. And I had done the race, and I look over at a tree, and Mr. Max King, I'm revealing one of his secrets right now to all his audience. And Max is doing sit-ups. He had just run a marathon over the high altitude. And I'm like, Max, what are you doing? I said, you just won today's stage. And he looked over at me as he's doing sit-ups, and he goes, Jorge, this is why I win. And I was like, wow. This is
I don't know if it was quite like that. That's in Jorge's mind right there.
But in all honesty, Max is right. Like this may sound silly, and it's because of like, my access to the industry is one of the things that I've done, especially with balancing, like living in a household with 2 athletes and 2 children. Like one of the things that I've done is like, there is honestly like a foam roller in every room of our house, because if I've got like 10 minutes, I'm grabbing my foam roller. Even like today, like my son, my 7-month-old son was playing with the baseball, and I'm just like rolling as he's doing that. Like I'm foam rolling, and just doing those things, even if I've got like a spare 5-10 minutes in their living room. Well, we've got a foam roller in the living room. So just foam rolling and stretching and taking care of those, like just keeping your muscles fresh and recovered is super essential. And it just keeps you healthy, and also more importantly, activates to let you know like, ooh, hey, wait a second, why does that hurt? And it brings body awareness, and I think that's really critical, to be attentive to your own body awareness and also just take care of it as you need it, and seek the resources or, the strengthening that's required in order to keep you healthy, because healthy is the key.
Great. Yeah. So true. Paddy, you have anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think like finding platforms that can get you to do this cross training is very useful. One thing I've started rock climbing a lot the last couple of years, and that's great strength, balance, stretching training as well. So stretching is something from my lacrosse days I was never very good at. Yeah. So that's something I've used a lot to kind of balance my strength work. I was very fortunate. What got me into running was when I was part of this November Project running group here in San Francisco, and that group was like groups of people going out to do bodyweight exercises every Wednesday morning, and that was something that I was involved in that group for 4 or 5 years, and I never got hurt. And the last 2 years I stepped down from leading that. I stopped doing those stretch or the exercises with that. And now I'm getting all these tweaks. I'm also getting older, so that might be it. But I'm substantially younger than several people on this call. So maybe, but I think it's because I stopped doing that. I started to get the injuries. So now I regretfully am trying to catch up with that. So after bringing in proper strength training as part of my my regimen, but I'm just trying to keep disciplined with that, because for every level of the sport, it's so important. For us to still be doing this when we're 60, 70 plus.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, guys. And I think it's so important for people who are newer to the sport, or who, generally just want to get the best out of themselves, to understand that it's not necessarily about just putting in heroic training volume, that it is all about doing the little things well, and also having some range and some versatility in athleticism. So Hayden, I wanted to go to you on something I thought would be an interesting thing to talk about, and that is the fact that you, after Western States, decided to move out of the UTMB field and focus more on the shorter distance races. As a professional in the sport who has high ambitions, who has a really bright future ahead of you, and a lot of years still to develop, I wondered if you maybe wanted to share a little bit about what went into that decision for you, why you decided to not run UTMB and instead focus on these other races that you mentioned, Sierra Zinal and OCC.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it kind of goes along with what we just talked about with injury prevention, but also not always focusing on going bigger and better, or like bigger all the time, right? I think in America, we're so focused on doing the biggest things, right? Like we need to do the max amount of miles that our bodies can handle. We need to do this, we need to run the biggest things possible. And it's not true. Like you need to do what you love to do. And, everybody's different, just because whatever Jim Walmsley can handle 150, 160 miles a week doesn't mean everybody should be doing 150, 160 miles a week. There's a time and a place for high mileage. Yes. There's a time and a place to get very specific before a race, which is usually 4 to 6 weeks out. You look at Beth Pascal, who won Western States this year, prime example. She runs on the flat most of the year. And then she'll go out and go to, a place where she can get specific 4 to 6 weeks out before a race, hits her goals, and then dominates the race. And I think that's a prime example that we don't always have to be doing high mileage all the time. We don't always have to be doing 100 milers all the time. And I think that's what kind of hit me is I kind of got trapped in that whole thing of like, I need to do UTMB because it's the race to do. It's the big one, right? It's the World Series, whatever you want to call it. And I just kind of got to the point where I'm like, my body's not ready to handle back-to-back 100 milers yet. I'm only 30 years old. I've only been in the sport for 5 years. You can still win UTMB when you're 35 years old, upper 30s, low 40s. And so I'm like, well, maybe I should wait on that. Let's focus on one at a time. Let's get dialed in. Let's get focused on one race. And that one race that I want to win right now in my career is Western States. So I just was like, UTMB could put me back on my goal of winning Western States next year. It'd be way more important to focus on some speed, get that in, do some of these races that I've always wanted to do. And then later on in my career, when I, maybe 5 years from now or something, when I'm ready, I can run UTMB and I can extend my career that way. And it's been in my head, like, I need to make the smart decision. I don't always just need to do what everybody else is doing. I don't need to just do bigger things all the time. I need to be smart and I need to listen to my body. I need to listen to what is right for me at this time. And so that's why I did that. And I really do love the shorter distances too. They're fun, they're fast. I have a lot of speed and I've done really well in some of those shorter things.
And they're also really important races too. And yeah,
exactly.
It's a sign of maturity. And Max, I wanted to toss it to you here now because Hayden sort of brought up this concept of specificity. And of course, we've sort of already talked about your versatility as an athlete, but you're the two-time champion of the VK at Broken Arrow. You're two-time winner of the 26K at Broken Arrow. This year, you're signed up for the 52K. So maybe in this theme of specificity or anything else that you want to sort of elaborate on that Hayden talked about, can you just talk about the value of that and maybe add some practical tips about how you would train for each one of those distances a little bit differently?
Yeah, well, I mean, the base is like that's the important thing. And, for me, that's, the basis of all of this is not necessarily really high mileage, but it's a good aerobic base of easy mileage. And then on top of that, I'm going to be putting in, usually I'm trying to do some sort of interval workout, a hill workout and a tempo run. And I'm kind of cycling through those three types of workouts. And that's what I've done for the last 20 years.
What do you mean by that? Like interval workout, would that be anything that is sort of like an on-off type stimulus? Or when you say interval, do you mean more like track-based, higher intensity stuff?
Track-based, cross-country based, higher VO2 type stuff, VO2 type intervals, where you're getting into that VO2 range. Where it's a little bit higher intensity than a tempo type run or a threshold type run, but you're getting into that VO2 area and you're cycling on off, and I think those are super important because I think like in terms of like a ultra or anything like that, obviously it's going to be really important for short distance. Everybody knows that you need that, higher intensity stuff for that. But even for the ultras and stuff, like I'll still be doing that stuff because I feel like it plays into that base level of general fitness. And the fitter you are going into a 100-miler, the fitter you are going into a 100-miler, and it can't hurt. And so a lot of that stuff is that general base that I'm talking about. And then on top of that, when you start to get specific, it's like for Sierra Zinal, for example, like Sierra Zinal is a really good example of a race where specific fitness is so important because you climb for about 6 miles straight up, and then you got to turn it on and run like a marathoner across the top for about 15 miles or so. And so if you can't run across the top after you've climbed 6,000 feet, then it's all over. And I did that the first year and I realized like, okay, I need to take a step back and figure out like what exactly I'm doing in my training in order for me to use the speed that I've got across that top section. And so I started climbing hills. I put a lot more vert into my training. I made sure that I could get up, a 3,000 foot climb, still feel good. And then, turn it on and move fast. And so things like that, whenever you talk about specific training, it's always specific to your next goal race. There might be some other races in there that you're using for tune-ups, but that goal race, that A race that you've got on the calendar, look at the terrain. Like, is it technical? Do you have a lot of elevation gain? Is it flat and fast? You know, do you, like, whatever it might be that's specific to that particular race, take those elements out that you feel like you need to work on, and then put them into your training. And like Hayden said, 4 to 6 weeks out, that's probably enough time to be doing that. Sometimes if you're really trying to like work on a specific concept, like I was working on mountain running, it's more of an all year sort of thing, where you're kind of working on that all year long. But if it's a specific race type thing where you need to just kind of like pinpoint a specific part of a course, then yeah, 4 to 6 weeks out, and hit it hard and figure that out and get your body used to that stimulus.
Yeah. So sticking with you for just one more second here, Max, you mentioned sort of like potentially having sort of stepping stone goals. And so for you, looking at what you have coming up, you have the mountain running championships at Mount Hood coming up very soon, and then followed by the Broken Arrow 52K. So maybe talk about that sequencing in your scheduling and maybe why it makes sense from a competitive perspective.
Well, you know, the mountain running stuff that I'm going to be doing, there's my daughter. Hi. That mountain running stuff in a couple of weeks, that was just kind of, so I came off of Western States. I took a week off and started running again. I've had 3 weeks of running camp, right? And in that time, up at this other running camp that I do at Steens Mountain, we do a 5K race every Friday. And I jumped in the last 2 weeks into this 5K uphill race, and it went like surprisingly well. It was like, oh, I'm in not that bad a shape. So that's why, like, I'm like, oh, I'll sign up for the mountain running championships. So is it a goal race for me right now? No, not really.
Right,
I mean, coming off like 5 to 6 weeks after Western States.
That's what I'm getting at though. It's like a workout almost.
There's no way I'm making that a goal race right now. If I get 10th, I'll be excited. If I get first, I'll be really excited.
Yeah.
But it's not a goal race. And that is my buildup though, is that switching gears now into shorter distance stuff is like, hey, I got to start somewhere, right? So this is kind of like getting me to do some of those shorter distance interval workouts over the next couple of weeks, get into that VO2 range and kind of hit some of those things that I'm going to need further down the road. And you mentioned Broken Arrow 52K. That just changed today, because I told Brendan yesterday, I was like, I think I'm covering the 26K. I think I got to do the 52K. And then I talked to Steph today, and she's like, oh, you could probably run the 26K. So we might be going back to the 26K, because at Broken Arrow.
Come on, man. You're our only hope to win all the distances at Broken Arrow in your career. You've already got 2 of them. You got to do the 52K.
I'm not going to count it out. I'm going to give Brendan an answer in a couple of weeks. I wouldn't mind running the 52. I think at Broken Arrow, that 26K is the race, right?
Sweet,
that is one loop. It's the beauty of the race. And that's kind of like why I've always done that one.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, I should do the 52K. So I don't know. We'll see. That's still up in the air. Also, like all this talk about the Olympics and watching the Olympic trials on TV, like in the next year, and you guys talking about cross country, I'm coming down there for cross country down to the Bay Area this year.
Yeah.
I want to get into some more cross country races. I miss it. I've been at cross country camp the last 2 weeks, and all these kids are running around, and like I miss it, And that's kind of why I continue to change everything all the time, is because I'm like, oh man, I really miss that scene. And Jorge was talking about, get like having like touching base with all these different groups and stuff. And it's totally what it's all about, because you can get in the cross country scene. And it's totally different people than the track scene, and they're really fun. And so I want to go back, do cross country this year. I want to go back and do a steeplechase next spring. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's just like throw it all in there, see what happens.
So we'll gladly recruit you to SFRC.
Yeah.
Well, Max, you have a guest bedroom that awaits you. You're very welcome. And it'll just be wonderful to share the house environment, knowing that, an Oregonian comes down and loses to a Californian in the Masters category.
Oh, okay. All right. It's on now, baby.
Yes. Love the trash talk. Hey, Paddy, I wanted to move to you before on this subject of specificity, before we take one of the questions from our audience here. I just think it's an interesting thing for you to talk about specifically, and I think you can add a lot of great insights for the audience here on the subject of specificity, being somebody who lives in the heart of San Francisco, you've been, top 5 at Broken Arrow. You're a great athlete in the mountains, and also you can run cross country. You've run super fast marathon, but I wondered if maybe you wanted to share any insights from when you did perform so well at Broken Arrow back in 2019 while living at low elevation in a dense metropolitan area, how you went about training for that in a way that you think set you up for success.
Mm-hmm. I think it's like getting to know the city that you're in, or the area that you're in, researching it well and finding the good locations to maximize your training. I'm quite fortunate if I'm going to live in any city to be training for mountain running. Hilly San Francisco is quite a good one to be in. But still, our biggest climbs are 500-600 feet, and there's a lot of crosswalks and things like that in the way. But you have to capitalize on, like, I work a full-time job, so a lot of my training ends up being commute running. But I just plan it well, where like on a Tuesday evening, I run home and I do speed work on the way home, and a Wednesday morning I run commute in and hit all the hills in San Francisco. So it's just getting to know your area and being open to doing like different approaches to training in the area. Like if you look for Western States, Casey liked it. He used to train running up and down like a car parking ramp, I think, where she's from. And so you just have to get to know your area and kind of recognize the good little nuggets you might have in your backyard that you don't realize for training.
Yeah. Terrific. So I want to pose a question sort of in the same vein here of just like dealing with challenges in our training. This comes from Ian in the chat, and he's, it looks like from New Zealand. And he says, just a bit of advice. We are in managed isolation for 14 days in New Zealand. We have 1 hour per day outside and we can't run. What would you recommend for maintaining fitness while stuck in a room for 14 days? I'll open that up to the audience if there's any, or to the panel here, if there's any creative insights of how to manage fitness during a 14-day isolation. Any advice, gentlemen?
I feel bad for the person who is in the room below you, but burpees are great for that.
Yeah, I think another great tool, I mentioned it earlier, is Zwift. If you have the ability, if you have a bike and you have a smart trainer, or you have a way to get on Zwift, you can get some really good hill training on Zwift. I mean, there's some incredible routes on there that can get you super fit. I used Zwift a ton going into JFK last year, and that turned out pretty well. I was fitter than I've ever been. And honestly, I'm going to be using that in a lot of my training blocks to come. Another one is I had an athlete that I coach out in India who was locked down for like a month. I mean, it was a long time. And he would just walk up and down the stairs in his apartment complex. I mean, he would just do it for like an hour straight and just go up and down the stairs. And, it wasn't running, but he was at least training his legs for some climbing and some descending. And so when he got to get on the trails after isolation, his legs were prepared to handle the trails.
Yeah, great advice. And it's obviously a difficult situation, and fitness is probably going to suffer no matter what. So maybe detaching from it a little bit is probably advisable for Ian. But Ian, man, we're thinking about you. Hopefully you get through this 14 days with sanity on the back end. But Jorge, honestly, this is a good segue to something you and I actually just talked about on the phone today. You're coming off a Western States 100 as well. And, without going into detail, I know you were dealing with a lot of stress going into the race yourself. And I think it makes you guys relatable to the audience to know that, like, going into a big goal race, you're a lot of like the external factors in our life can be going sideways. Everything can just be sort of chaotic and not conducive to sort of a high performance mentality and ultimately sort of living up to our potential as athletes. So I wondered if you maybe wanted to just share any advice for just kind of dealing with external stress, still maintaining goals as an athlete and staying focused.
Yeah, well, I think that naturally, being the culture in which we are all in together, that perseverance is power. And adversity is part of what brings us all into this sport. And as complex as life is, and as complex as like the difficulties that sometimes are external variables that we don't possess any power or control in, that do have control in our lives in one shape or form, doesn't dictate our ability to still be hungry and desirable to be a contributing member to our community, as well as pursue and push ourselves to new heights. And again, being a new father and having, now a share household of 2 athletes, it just really, more than anything, makes me hungrier, and equally so makes me feel like I still have yet to reach my best potential in different distances, which equally so, like Hayden has said, like I'm already thinking 2022, as much as we feel like the gates of running and events have just opened up for 2021. But, one of my exciting things is, like, in December, like, I'm super excited to finally race CIM. And as excited as I am for the fall and winter training for CIM, I'm also seeing that as a stepping stone, likely to make my way back to Tarawera, and then, take some time and make my way back into the spring and summer into trail ultras, to then go back into the fall of 2022 into marathon and cross country, And so I think that despite that some of those life difficulties that occur in every single one of our lives, I think those are the things that I think are just external cues to challenge us of how much more patient can we be, how much more forgiving can we be, and more than anything, how much more loving can we be, and more so contribute to our community and to our culture that we are all a part of. And that is essentially what I think 2020 has really and hopefully brought to all of our realization,
Beautiful, beautiful. So maybe sticking with this subject of humanization of the 4 of you guys on this call, it's just occurring to me that all of us were at Western States, and 3 of you ran the race, and all 3 of you had a tough time. Max, you dropped out of the race. Hayden, you finished 8th, but admittedly had a bit of an implosion late, and certainly I'm sure left a lot of time out on the course, and that's why a big goal of yours in your career is to win that race. Jorge, you made the finish line, but under 24 hours, but obviously well below your potential. And I wondered if maybe of the 3 of you guys who did the race and dealing with adversity, dealing with a feeling of maybe disappointment, of underperformance, maybe failure, any positive things that came out of that for the 3 of you guys on the call that maybe you want to share with the audience that makes you a little bit more relatable, because we all do go through these ups and downs. Maybe Max, we'll throw it to you first.
Oh, great. The positive that came out of that was that 100 milers are really hard. I learned that lesson. This was my 3rd 100 miler. My first one was Western States. It went relatively well for me that year. The next one was Leadville. I failed at that one. Well, from my perspective, obviously this is all perspective, but walked it in from 20 miles out at Leadville. And so I've had that experience of breaking down and then having to walk it in. And that was one where I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to finish, and at all costs. This one was a little bit different. This one was, I have that belt buckle. I've done the walk in from 20 miles out before. I lost my time goals going into this one. And so in the end, at about 80 miles where I dropped from, I had lost all of that motivation. And so I didn't have anything left to hang on to get me to the finish line. And that was different for me. And whether that's a positive or negative, I can't really say, but it was different for me. And I didn't meet my goals. But at the same time, I think the positive coming out of that is that, I still want to run it again. It's still on the back of my mind. I'm not going to do it next year. I already made up my mind there, but I do want to come back and do it again, because Western States is that special 100 miler for me too, and really the only one now that I want to run. Just because 100 miles are hard, and I'm not that focused on 100 milers like Hayden. Like, I like those shorter distances, and I still like those shorter distances. And I think there's some importance to those, but in America, we kind of put all of that energy and attention on those 100-milers, and I just don't think it has to be that way. But it was. But for me, I'm glad that I ran it, and that I'm trying those things out. It's a new challenge for me, and I still have things to learn about it. So,
yeah. Hayden, anything to add, or what any silver linings to your race at Western States, where I'm sure you feel like you could have done a lot better?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always hold a really high standard for myself. I believe in myself so much. I mean, I believe I can win everything. I really do. And I have that drive and determination. So to blow up at mile 92 and literally suffer for 8 miles trying to get to the finish line was really, really hard for me, especially because I've had a lot of success right off the bat in a lot of ultra marathons. I won my first 50K, I won my first 100K, I won my first 120K, and they were all very, very competitive races. So to not be able to at least compete and win, have a chance to win my first 100-miler was very hard for me. But I had a friend who she's a local here in Cedar City. She's an Olympic cross-country skier. She sent me a text after the race, and she said, just keep your head up. There's a big learning curve the longer you go. And she also said, look at the positives. And she told me a story about her career, trying to make the Olympic team, and how she had so many low points before she finally had that high point and qualified for the Olympic team. And I started looking at that, and I said, well, let me look at the positives of this race. I was fitter than I've ever been. I was fit at JFK. Well, I was fitter going into Western States this year, and I still am very, very fit. I feel like my fitness is at an all-time high. I did a lot of very good things for the race. I messed up on one thing, and that's like when I made my list. I made a list of the positives and negatives, and the only negative I really had was one thing. I didn't take 2 bottles with me going out of Forest Hill. I only took 1 bottle, thinking I could make up time by carrying less weight. It was a stupid mistake. I got off my nutrition plan, and I got extremely dehydrated, and it hit me at 92 miles. And I couldn't do anything because my body shut down because of severe dehydration. And I had to sit in the aid station until I could pee, just because I was so dehydrated. Well, anyways, that's all I got to fix. I got to fix one thing, and other than that, it was a great race. And so I think you got to look at the positives and things. You can't always dwell on the negatives. You can't tear yourself down, because it's not going to do anything for you. You got to look forward and fix that one thing and go forward next year and win the thing, and that's my whole outlook on it. And I was very happy with the day, and my best races have always came after hard races. Defeats. So I'm happy.
Wow. Yeah. Very well said, Hayden. And it goes back to what Max said earlier about not being afraid to learn, and to take the lessons from these disappointments, and they do make us better athletes. Jorge, anything you want to add from your mission at Western States, where you admirably made the finish line, but certainly I'm sure felt like you could have done a lot better?
Yeah, well, I wish I only had 8 miles like Hayden to walk. Instead, it was much further. But I first and foremost just want to say, as a participant of this sport and as a fan of this sport, I'd like to just say that I commend and respect Max's choice. I think that's one that can be so easily judged because we're all fanatics of this sport. And I just want to say I commend Max's decision for being able to say, like, hey, you know what? Like, this is my point of my decision, and this is what I'm deciding. And I just want to say there's a lot of respect and admiration in that, Max.
Thanks.
Thanks,
man.
Thank you. I value that. And at the same time, as I hear him from Hayden being, 13 years older than him, hearing him talk and how much he's like a big part of what that next generation of our sport is, and you'll have to excuse me, I don't use language and my kids aren't around. That fucking fires me up, because I'm like, damn it, like, I need to train harder. I need to train faster. And like, I want to toe the line with Hayden again. And I want to, I think the only way that I get better, and I think the only way Hayden and all of us gets better, is a big part of the reason why we're all in it. It's because of community. The only reason and way we all get better is because we're all at the line together. Like,
Yeah.
Hayden ran faster because of Jim. Jim ran faster because of Hayden, you know, and it's all possible because of the community. We all make each other better and faster. And for me, most certainly, I look back, and by no means to follow everyone else's plan, but I certainly didn't have by no means appropriate mileage to even dare say finish Western States. So the fact that, you know, hearing Hayden say like, oh man, I've had a really low mileage week, 70 to 80. And I'm like, shit, I only ran 170-mile week getting into Western. You know, I'm like, I'm balancing so many other things. So I did recognize that I most certainly didn't have high mileage, but, you know, I somehow found a lot of internal reasons for why I wanted to get myself to the track. And so, you know, those reasons for me personally were enough to find a way to enjoy my Avon walk to Placer High School.
Well, it's great, you know, and it's I think just ironic. It's a total coincidence that, you know, the three of you all had sort of tough finishes in your own way, but you guys are all champions and you're all going to be back. And yeah, it is the tough ones that make us stronger. So I appreciate you guys sharing the silver linings. Paddy, I want to ask you about your experience too before we close with another question from the audience. And I know you paced Drew Holman, who is ultimately the third place finisher. Any valuable insights you got from having a front row seat to somebody who was able to sort of have a really awesome standout performance on such a tough day?
Yeah. It was, so Drew started running with me back in like 2015. So he kind of grew up with the sport in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco running community. That's like, we matured as like in our late 20s as runners. And the reason like I've got to where I'm at and how Drew got to like podiuming at Western States is because of the community around us. And that's something that Broken Arrow has really focused on in terms of their race, is like building community, and that everyone that's part of that community is valuable. And it's just enjoying the times you're out. Every opportunity you get out to run with your friends. The miles I had with Drew before he actually dropped me in the first leg that I paced him. So 4 of us had rough days out there. But mine was only 16 miles into my run. But those miles I got to share with him, and then the last 7 or 8 miles I got to share with him on the last leg were just truly special, because every time you get to run with your friends in the mountains, it's an amazing opportunity.
It's the only thing the second best thing to running with your friends in the mountains is talking on Zoom with your friends about running with your friends in the mountains, isn't it? Well, guys, this has been so great. I want to close with another question from one of our viewers. This is from Brian, and it's a pretty open-ended training question. So whoever wants to tackle this, feel free. Sounds like he's getting ready for the 52K. Heck yeah, Brian. And he's just asking, is a 5-hour run good training for the 52K, or is it too much? And should I focus my efforts on the hills? So maybe just general training advice for Brian as he prepares for the 52K. Is a 5-hour long run good? And what about some hill efforts? Whoever wants to take it. Hayden, you're the champion and you're a coach. Why don't you take it?
Yeah, I'll take it. I guess it kind of depends on what he's planning on running, like his time, you know, like I don't know what his goal is for the race. But a 5-hour training run could be great, you know, especially if you're planning on hitting, you know, 7-8 hours in the race or something like that. I focus on time a lot. And so I'll look at my race and say like, okay, well, this race is going to take me 6 hours to do. I should at least get around a 4-hour run in to make sure that I'm ready, you know, and then I only have to go 2 hours more. And so, yeah, I think, you know, if you're planning on running, you know, somewhere between 7 to 10 hours, yeah, a 5-hour run could be a good run, a good training run. But you want to make it specific. Like Max talked about, everything it's so important to be specific, you know, like, we don't just need to go out there and just train and just get miles to just get miles in. No, you need to be very specific with your miles, you know, like Broken Arrow has 10,000 feet of elevation gain. You know, one thing I did when before I won the race is I did a lot of repeats where I would go 1 to 2 miles uphill and then turn around right at the top and go 1 to 2 miles downhill, and then turn around and go 1 to 2 miles uphill, and just did repetitive up, downs, because Broken Arrow has a lot of that. And especially with the 52K, it's 2 26-kilometer loops. Well, you have to go down and then you have to climb right back up, after the first loop. And so you have to train your legs to be able to handle that second climb. And so I would do a lot of repeats like that, where I'd get very specific on that, and make sure my legs were ready to be able to handle that transition from the fast descent to back to the climb.
That's great. So I hope Brian's listening. That's fresh advice straight from the 2019 champion, Hayden Hawks. And I think it is very smart. Yeah, sometimes the training isn't sexy. Sometimes it is a little contrived. Sometimes you do have to just go up and down the same hill a few times in order to simulate that specificity, which is so, so important. Guys, I'm going to let you go now, but we got an update from our man Ian in a 14-day lockdown. He's saying that they're going to be doing burpees nonstop while they're locked down. So shout out to Ian. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks to our viewing audience. We hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. If you don't already, make sure you check out all 4 of these great athletes on the internet. As I said at the beginning of the show too, go check out Broken Arrow. Make sure you follow them on social media. If you're sufficiently inspired, go to Ultra Sign Up, type in Broken Arrow, sign up for one of the races, especially the 52K, the VK, or the 11K. I have it on good authority that you will, in all likelihood, get into the race, even if you have to sign up for that wait list. And if you can't make it in person, we really hope that you will join myself, Jorge, and our co-host, Corinne Malcolm. We are very much looking forward to providing expert commentary and analysis of the 2021 Broken Arrow races all weekend. I certainly can't wait for it. And I think that's it. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. For Paddy O'Leary, Jorge Maravilla, Max King, Hayden Hawks, my name is Dylan Bowman. I hope you guys all have a great night. Peace.
Thanks.
Ciao.